Have you heard? Metro by T-Mobile now includes Amazon Prime. Yes, enjoy the best of shopping and entertainment, movies, TV shows, music, free shipping, and much more. All included for just $40 per line for 3 lines. All on the T-Mobile network. Discover the smarter way. Metro by T-Mobile. That's genius. One offer per account. Offer subject to change. $12.99 per month value. Offer valid for new Amazon Prime members. Metro customers may notice reduced speeds versus some T-Mobile customers. Video at 480p. Capable device required. See store for details and terms and conditions.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aquarium Radio at aquariumradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Carolessa, with my co-hosts, Karen Christine Patrick and Reverend John Polk. And today we have a very special episode with Casper Parks on Experiencers Network. Reverend John Polk, are you there?
I am here.
Would you like to read the bio for Casper Parks so you can tell our listeners a little bit more about our special guests?
Absolutely. Casper Parks. Compelled to write, Casper Parks has published 4 novels. With each new novel, his writing improves. I'm not going to go into any detail about the novels because we want Casper to do it, but they are called Perceptional Threshold, Ages Past, Coming from Darkness, and Bristol. Currently, he is editing book 5 and writing book 6 for the start of a new series. Now, some history on Casper. After high school, he served in the United States Navy as a radioman, held a top-secret security clearance, and completed a Westpac. He makes no claims to have insider knowledge of government cover-ups of UFOs. 3 semesters into college, opportunity knocked. For many years, he worked in the music industry, starting as a roadie and working his way into lighting technician and stage manager. In the early 1990s, he was on-site manager of a rehearsal studio for bands in downtown Los Angeles. He left his career in the music industry on Labor Day 1993. He has worked as an announcer for rock, easy listening, and country radio stations. Laying it between the lines, he considers fiction a method to aid with broadening perceptions of reality and preparing for disclosure. His readership spans numerous nations and ages. Since early childhood, he has had a fascination with space travel, UFOs, and aliens. Casper Parks is active and respected in the UFO community. He has witnessed a UFO close enough to throw a rock at it and has had a missing time episode. And that's a brief summary of Casper Parks' history.
Excellent. Karen, are you there? Would you like to check in?
Yeah, I'd like to check in. There goes my first question. I was going to ask if you had any secret insider information, but if you've seen a UFO close enough to hit it with a rock, that's good enough for me.
Okay, and Casper, this is Janet Lesson, and I think it's probably all true, everything you're writing. No. Tell us about you have a fascinating history. It makes me wonder, it kind of reminds me of Robert Heinlein. He was in the military back in the day, I guess in the 30s and 40s, and by the 50s and 60s, he was writing all this science fiction to kind of convey to us a new reality about where we can go. I'm getting some feedback. Okay, go ahead. Welcome, Casper.
Okay.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself and your work and your ideas
Sure,
and concepts.
Yeah. Okay. I was in the service in the mid-late 70s in the Navy. But I know people are going to wonder about the UFO encounter close enough to throw a rock at, so I'll probably quick touch base on that. It was 1971. I was 14 years old at the time. I was working at a Christian summer camp in southwest Michigan. And, you know, it was back in the day, same time around like Kent State happened a year or so around that time period. And for the collegians or senior counselors, college students, two of them, myself, and then another counselor my age, who was 14. We washed dishes and worked as junior counselors and helped with crafts. You know, we decided to go down to the lake to go swimming. And, you know, back then you could go skinny dipping, no one thought anything of it. You know, nowadays you don't do that, but, you know, back in the day it was different. And we went down there. The lake was really calm. There was no wind, nothing at all. I mean, it was like really, really calm. It's an inland lake, partly surrounded by hills. And we had trucked down a hill to get down to the lake, and we saw an orange, white glow from one of the hillsides where there's a blueberry farm, and it shot over. The camp was on 80 acres. It shot over the lake, which was probably a good 40-acre lake, and it shot over the lake and right up along the swimming area where the camp was, and it hovered maybe, probably not much more than 7 to 10 feet off the ground, or off the water rather, right at the edge of the lake. And again, the lake is really smooth. It was really warm, and it just sat there or hovered there. And we stood there and looked at it, and it hovered for quite a few seconds. And then it darted up over the hill. And so we ran up to chase after it, and, you know, we get into the woods then, and we get out to the athletic field. It's long gone by then. And about a week and a half later, and I'm standing out, you know, to get the kids to bed after campfire and stuff. The counselors would hang out, play games like Monopoly or something. And I went back to the cabin maybe just a little before midnight and decided I wanted to go out to the athletic field, which is a rolling hay field, and kind of just stand there and watch the sky because there's no light pollution out there. And so I'm watching the skyline, and I looked at my watch, and it was a little after 12, maybe like 12:20 is what I wrote down. And then all of a sudden, it's like really dewy and wet, and I see the UFO further off in the distance, the same one, and it shoots away. And I looked at my watch, and all of a sudden it went from being like 12:20 to 3:15 in the morning. I just like, bam, it was gone. And I was no longer standing in the exact same spot I was. I had moved over several feet and forward. So I woke up a couple of the counselor and told them, the senior counselor, and they're, you don't wake someone up at night, but you're a kid, you do. And so the next day, if you really saw it, you got to report it. So we called, so the camp counselor called it in, and I was down helping with the canoeing craft for the campers. And they called it in, and it was near lunchtime, and I went up the hill, and Army four-door sedan was setting up by the flagpole. Cars normally didn't pull that far into the camp because you had kids running around. And there was an Army officer standing there and talking to the camp director, and a couple of the campers were like, oh, there he is. And they just tossed, the guys from the military just tossed me a really, I was going to say a dirty look, but a strange, kind of felt kind of like a dirty, nasty look. And they didn't talk to me at all. Got in his car, and then they left. And they told us that the first sighting we had, you know, we can have earlier, and the one that I saw were experimental helicopters. And the two senior counselors were like, right, experimental helicopters that make no noise and move no air, you know. So it was like experimental helicopter, right, you know, sure. And now we are in Southwest Michigan here, so that, and, you know, and this area is known for UFO sightings, particularly over the lake. So we do get them periodically here. But that was probably one of my best encounters. I had one earlier where I had some missing time, but it was a little different. So, you know, when I was a little younger. But where I was in, I'm going to guesstimate second or third grade, and I woke up one morning, and it was like late January, so it's cold, and I'm all bundled up, and I'm sitting there looking up at Venus and no idea how I got in the alleyway. And I thought, oh, it's time for school, so I went off to school. The doors were all locked, and, you know, I was one of those I had to use the bathroom real bad. But Yeah, so, but I didn't see the UFO then, but just all of a sudden I was there staring up at Venus in the morning sky. And because it's such a bright, skies were a little clearer back then because we didn't have all the light pollution and stuff that we have now. So, you have another question about anything like that at all?
Oh, well, we're going to go kind of round robin here with questions, and I'll step out for a moment because there's something I have to attend to, and then I'll be back. So we're going to put you, Casper, on the hot seat. I wanted to know, do you have any pictures of yourself, or is that your real name, or is that a pseudonym?
Oh, okay. Casper Parks is a pen name. I emailed a picture to you guys, I thought.
Okay. John probably hasn't forwarded it to me yet.
Yeah,
I did.
I
thought I did a carbon copy when I thought I did a carbon copy and I mailed it, but there's a picture of me. Yeah, getting a picture of me is like pulling teeth, but I do provide them once in a while.
Oh, that's great. So, I guess I'll ask you a question, and then we'll go to Karen because we haven't heard from her yet. And let's see. I was looking at your books, and they look pretty interesting. The young man on the cover of Bristol, is that supposed to be you?
No.
Representation of you?
Yeah, well, they're self-published books, so there are some grammar errors here or there on them. I purchased the artwork, and then put the title and my name on it when it's self-published. So you can get my books in print or ebook. Right now, my ebooks are free at several locations that wanted to do that for the show. So if someone wanted to download an ebook, they could get it for free. With the exception of Amazon, I couldn't do that. But like Kobo Books, Barnes and Noble, Google Play, and iTunes, my ebooks are all free right now. I went and set the price at $0 for the show. So that way, someone wants to go download it. Because to me, it's more important to get the word out than to make. You don't make a living when you self-publish books. But the artwork I thought was really good on Bristol. It fit the story really well. Yeah, it was the first. I have a friend of mine, Ralph Codd. He's a best-selling Western author, and this was years ago. And he goes, "Well, give yourself an assignment in a genre and write it." And then I had watched a PBS special on a region of Australia called Kakadu, and then I was driving to work the following morning, and the story hit me of a boy who was probably right around 12 years old, who was raised by native Aborigine in Australia, and this is at the time of the U.S. Civil War. It's just about to start. This is a historical book, and his father is murdered, his mother dies of broken heart, so he's adopted by native Aborigine. At that time, the Australian government used to give bullets to and ammunition to people to go out and hunt the native Aborigine, and they jokingly refer to it as rabbit hunting, and just go out and shoot them, just to get rid of them. And it's a sorry part of history, but it's something that actually happened. So he's coming from that past and ends up losing his clan. And, he's a Caucasian kid, though. But he loses his clan and goes in the city of Limebreath and has to kill a peace officer who is crooked in self-defense, and then ends up getting on a T-clipper and going to San Francisco to escape a murder charge. He's only 12. And then he gets all wrapped up in he loses his hearing while on the ship. Someone attacks him, and he meets a U.S. ambassador on the ship. And the ship used to be right about that same time. England and France used to deal opium along the Chinese coast, and part of their goal, this is historical fact, was to get the young people along the Chinese coast to get the opium, so it would make colonization easier of China. And they had what was called the Manchu Dynasty. The first treaty they broke.
Sorry about that.
They made another treaty with the Manchu dynasty to stop dealing opium. And the people that delivered the opium were referred to as buccaneers. And when they quit selling opium, the buccaneers became pirates. That's where pirates came from. So, but he gets on this tea clipper, which were formerly buccaneers. Sometimes they're working legit jobs, moving freight around the world. Sometimes they're working as pirates. But he ends up on a tea clipper, ends up getting rescued by some undercover Army operatives in Northern California, and gets all wrapped up in a conspiracy that revolves around the Civil War that's about to break out on the East Coast. And it was a real emotional story. I know women seem to like that story really well. I think they get kind of a motherly feeling toward Kern. The character's name is Kern. He has a dog named Bristol that was a gift from the Emperor of China for President Lincoln.
Wow.
And the dog was trained to sniff out opium, and that created a whole problem on the ship. Although opium was not illegal in the U.S. at that time unless a township deemed it so. But it gets all caught up in the conspiracy where a group of people are trying to succeed. California had just become a state, and they're trying to reverse that and possibly take everything west of the Rockies and form an entirely new nation when the Civil War breaks out. So he gets caught up in that mess. And it's a good story, and women seem to like the story really well because there's a couple spots where it makes them cry, which is all right. I think to invoke emotion like that, I think it's a good thing.
I like a good cry, that's for sure. Yeah, helps release the tension. I used to read Old Yeller every time I wanted to cry. Just give me Old Yeller and I'll get sobbing when they kill the dog, yeah. Well, it's fascinating. I'm going to pass our talking stick to Karen. Karen, what would you like to say to Casper?
Well, man, I got to read that book, and not particularly because I want to cry, but because I used to live on a boat, and I love maritime history. And you're right, before they became pirates, they were privateers, which means they were doing exactly that, shipping things like opium, slaves. They're on the Silk Road and all the different trade routes that were going back to that time. So I love that era, so I've got to read it now. But yeah, I want to go back to talking about the UFO that was hovering over the water, not being actually a military helicopter. How come we haven't seen one since then, right? But the thing is I like that because the craft that I saw fairly close in 1979. That was the thing. First when we first saw it, we thought it was a plane that might be on fire. That it had like amber-colored lighting on it, and it was coming toward us on a highway. And that's the thing that makes you go, "Hey, this is not normal," because it didn't make a sound. The behavior of the object didn't make any sense. It didn't make a sound. It didn't. It went faster than a jet plane. And we would have heard the engine. We actually turned off our vehicle so we could see it, and we got out and watched it, and there was no sound to it at all, which, of course, anything that had a combustible engine, any kind of jet, small airplane, whatever, would have had a combustible engine sound. There's no tailpipe, no gas coming out the end of it. And also the other thing for our thing was the shape of it was not aerodynamic. It was the star tetrahedron shape, which is not the shape of anything we know that flies. So, yeah, that's the thing that goes over your mind. I'm just wondering, over the years, now you've had some time to think about your sighting, what is, just that one incident, what have you felt you learned about your reality construct based on that one incident, and not to mention the lots of time later, but that particular sighting?
Well, it kind of reaffirmed, what I grew up in. When I was 5, 6 years old, I used my Tinker toys. My mother raised 5 kids by herself, so we grew up struggling. That was before the welfare was different then. And I built a square out of my Tinker toys, and my mother goes, "Oh, you built a car?" We didn't own a car, and I said, "No, Mom, it's a flying saucer. I'm going to get off the planet." And that, you got to figure I'm 59 years old now, so that would have been, and I was born in 57, so it would have been like 61, 62. So it was that, I've been into UFOs that long. in kindergarten, I had to repeat kindergarten, so I kept arguing with the teacher. On the color chart, I kept telling her, insisting that the color chart was incorrect, that there's colors in outer space that you're not seeing.
Wow.
Wow.
Yeah, so I kept insisting that. With the missing time, there was a strange sense of peace afterwards. I knew I was going to have some rough stretches in my life, and I have, and we all do. That's part of maturing, learning, getting through things. And but in the end, regardless of what takes place, everything will be all right. I don't.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know that it was the grays that caused missing time frame. In my mind, I say no. I don't think so. But I've declined going under hypnosis. That's not something I care to do.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people feel that way. Some people find it helpful and some people don't, right?
Yeah, and I think in part coming from darkness, which is my third book, kind of touches a little bit on that, but in an obscure way. But yeah, I think that the UFOs are real. I know that about 3-4 years ago, I was near Green Bay, Wisconsin, in De Pere, and one of my neighbors saw a triangle craft shoot over the rooftops across the street and go over the bay right near Green Bay there. And I had some binoculars, and we grabbed my binoculars, and we went out, and it hovered over the lake for like at least a good hour or more. It just was out there hovering. It was a big, giant triangle. And it was really interesting. He had seen it close up, but by the time he got me out, part of me was already shooting off over the bay. And it just hung out there for a while. I think the triangle crafts are ours. I have a strong suspicion that they belong to us, being like the U.S. government. That's my strong suspicion. Because, when we had the stealth bomber finally become public, that had been flying around, Area 51 and in Utah as well, and other areas for years before it became public that we had the stealth bomber. And I think the same thing with the triangles, that they'll become public knowledge in the near future. When that happens, it's going to change a lot of things on the planet with that are going on now globally, as far as conflicts and stuff go. But it's a whole other thing. But yeah, I think the triangle crafts are ours. Now, the one you said it was tetrahedron, like a pyramid shape, triangle shape.
Three-sided pyramid pointing up, three-sided pyramid pointing down. Some calls them Merkaba shape, star tetrahedron, and there were points of light on all the points, and all the entire lighting was a pinkish, orange, amber sort of color, and the center was glowing amber, and you could also see the infrastructure of the ship as it passed by. You could see copper-colored tubing and whatnot, like you were looking through some kind of force field, and you could see inside the ship somehow. It was very, very weird.
Wow.
It was getting easier to explain now that I know more about it.
Years and years ago, the UFO conspiracy things was long before the internet. There was one rumor that went around, and it's something that you really can't verify, that if it was a green glow craft, like my craft was more of an egg shape between the size of like a large Volkswagen or a small semi-trailer, but if it's a green glow, it was reptilian. If it was blue, it was gray aliens. If it was orange, white glow, then it was human aliens. But that's not something you could verify. That was just something that was circulating out there. And how much truth to that, the color, the glow of the craft, who knows for sure.
I did have one person say that the Anunnaki were also the human alien hybrid types that had ships that had orange or pink colored lights on their ships. That was validated by another experiencer. So there could be something to that. That way, I guess we should know what it is now.
Well, it's consistency, and that's the thing with the UFO. You hear a lot of things out there, and you always kind of want to be able to verify stuff. You kind of sort through everything, take your time, because you hear a lot of wild claims on things, and I look for consistencies. What's consistent? We see the grays pop up a lot. There's the old UFO theory that, and it's again theory, okay, that the grays were at the end of their genetic breeding code, and I write about this in my books, so I kind of wrap fiction around it a little bit. They're like at the end of the genetic breeding code and trying to turn us into them in an effort to save themselves. Now, this goes along with the Bible. John, in his book, Yahweh is an Alien, it kind of goes along that direction as well, is that they're trying to turn us into them in an effort to save themselves. So that's one big UFO theory out there. If you look at a lot of going on in society today, it's not something you can verify now. It's possible later. But if you look at society, for example, recently, is it okay to quote a news source here on the show?
Sure.
Okay. All right. On May 16th, Channel 8 out of Tampa, which is an NBC affiliate, and you can find this on YouTube, but Channel 8, NBC affiliate out of Tampa, Florida, did a little segment on encouraging parents to biochip their children the same way that you do a dog or a cat. Whether it's a good idea to do this, and if your child gets lost, you'll be able to find them, that sort of thing. I know that Tommy Thompson, the former governor of Wisconsin, who was Secretary of Health and Human Services under George Bush Jr., after he was done with that, he bought stock in a company called readership, and they believe that the microchip implant was a way of lowering healthcare costs and reducing malpractice suits and something going wrong where they misdiagnosed something. So we see a move toward that, whether it ends up being a biochip or something akin to it. If the grays operate as a hive mind and are actually trying to turn us into them, taking that type of a chip would be a step in that direction of becoming a hive mind, which is why I would be so much against it. When you look at the Bible predicts things like this. It goes, everybody will know everything about everybody. Well, you got the internet, and it sure is true. that came to pass. When I was in the early mid-'60s, I listened to prophecy in the church that I grew up in, and they say Israel will take possession of Jerusalem. And in 1967, in the Six-Day War, they did. So I've seen some prophecy from the Bible come true in my lifetime. So I do pay attention to it, because I've seen it verified where some of it's come true. But so my concern would be, if that's true, the grays are trying to turn us into them. If you look back at Adam and Eve, and John and I have talked about this as well, Reverend Polk, it's possible that Adam and Eve were a type of hybrid, and if you look at the gray alien, take the arms and legs off, it could almost pass as a snake. Tinted Adam and Eve, they ate whatever it is that they ate, altered their perception of reality or so on, broadened it or whatever, that it was a gray alien that did that. Maybe. But it's hard to say. You can't verify. It's just like theory. And then you hop-skip through possible alien contamination, interference, attempts at intervention. You can follow a path line of that through the Bible, which is really, really interesting when you sit down and really like plot through it all. But I believe that there's some truth in that. I know in the Bible it says that Satan stands before God and accuses man, but it doesn't say what he accuses man of. What if Satan's a hybrid, gray type of alien, looks at Earth and accuses man and says, look, they're monitoring everything that they do. They're taking the chips now. They're evolving toward a hive mind. Therefore, the Earth and her inhabitants are ours. And then you would have Anunnaki or whoever saying, well, if you weren't interfering with them, this wouldn't be going on, which is why some people believe that there was a war in the heavens before, and there's another one coming over the planet. It's not that we're the center of the universe, but that, something was going on here.
Thank you. Go ahead, John. Yeah, that's great. Go ahead, John.
Okay, wow, where do I begin? So I'm looking at the page that Janet, she's so good at putting these pages together, and so is Karen for that. Now we're talking about web design. But at the beginning of Coming from Darkness, your Kindle edition, you talk about something that a lot of people don't even know, and I didn't even realize it till a few years ago, but the Title 14, Section 1211 Code of Federal Regulations passed into law on July 16, 1969, and ironically, that's right before I was born and right before we landed on the moon also. But anyone to come in contact with an extraterrestrial and or UFO is jailed. And then NASA can enforce a quarantine on that court order that cannot be broken. And I don't know how many years later it was, but from what I understand, not too many years later, they rescinded the law because it put UFOs and extraterrestrials on the map by even creating the law in the first place. So I mean, okay, in 1992, and ironically, also in 1969 was the year that they ended Project Blue Book, which I find interesting.
Oh, that's right. I didn't even think about that.
I think the reason they ended Project Blue Book is because there was too much attention brought to it. Wow, the Air Force is investigating UFOs. Why would they do that? It basically acknowledges that they have a program in place through our government to investigate this phenomenon. And it just, I think after they sat at the round table long enough, they realized, we're still going to do these investigations. We don't necessarily need to call it Project Blue Book, which was originally called Project Sign, but we're still going to do it. We're just going to tell the public that we're not doing it anymore because there is no threat to national security. Anyway, I thought that was really interesting that you put that in that little blurb about Coming from Darkness, which is an incredibly interesting story in itself. But going back to... go ahead. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, as far as legislation goes, we need to keep in mind that, for example, in December, there's a legislation called CISPA, which allows internet companies and telecom companies to give all your data to the government and prohibits us from being able to sue them for violation of privacy. It's kind of just a layman's terms. And they attached that into a budget bill, which was a must-pass bill. So this legislation was rescinded in 1992, and they made a big joke of it when they rescinded it and everything. Congress laughed about it and blah, blah, blah. But the legislation gets often passed in the dead of night where people aren't aware of it, and it gets attached as a rider onto other unrelated legislation. So it's possible we could have legislation there, and there's so much legislation that to comb through to be able to find it. It might be difficult. So they could have reintroduced the legislation, and or something happens, which is what Coming from Darkness is about, where they decide to reintroduce the legislation and bring it back. But you were saying something else, John? I didn't mean to sidetrack you there.
No, it's okay. Anyway, going back to your sightings when you were working at the camp, so you were missing time for roughly 3 hours and 15 minutes, something close to that?
Yeah, I'll say 3 hours and 5 minutes probably.
Okay, and I would have to just make an educated guess that the Michigan Triangle, I live right off of the coast of where the Bermuda Triangle touches Florida. And, of course, we all know all the mythology and the reality behind the Bermuda Triangle. And the vortex is always in a constant state of flux. Also, part of the Bermuda Triangle is the Sargasso Sea, which is, millions of square miles. And very interestingly is that the Sargasso Sea contained within the middle of the Atlantic is completely and totally calm. There can be massive waves all around the Sargasso Sea, but for whatever reason, those swells flatten out when they get into that region of the Atlantic, and then they rebuild once they get closer to the eastern seaboard of the United States. But what a lot of people don't know is that the Michigan Triangle has more reported phenomenon in sightings by at least 2 to 3-fold than the Bermuda Triangle does, and it's 1/3 as big. I don't know if people know that, but it's absolutely true. That part of the Great Lakes, for whatever reason, I'm positive that there's bases there. It probably in all of the Great Lakes, probably multiple bases in all of the Great Lakes. But I was wondering if you thought that they may have come from the triangle there in the Michigan Triangle on the lake.
I couldn't answer that. It's possible. I know when I was in the field and they left, they shot kind of eastward. They were going straight up, like up at the ionosphere and leaving orbit. You know, going, up into orbit and past, like out into the solar system. So when I saw them leaving, when I was in the hayfield, they were leaving the atmosphere. But the one that came and hovered over the lake earlier, a few days earlier, that one came from the general direction of Lake Michigan. That camp, as the crow flies, I'm going to say is probably 10 to 20 miles from the lake as the crow flies. So it's relatively close. That was in Allegan, Michigan. It was a county. So if you look on a map, and there's a lot of sightings down near Sawyer, Benton Harbor, South Haven, Holland, Grand Haven, up into Ludington. But you're talking about the triangle, which is more down in that general area, which is where I was. It was real close to the triangle. You're right. It was like right there. As a crow flies, it's real close. So it's possible that the first one could have come out of the lake because it was coming from that direction.
So let's just speculate, and I'm not trying to place any thoughts in your head, but what do you think happened during that 3 hours and 5 minutes that you missed time, and that you said you were actually moved forward a number of paces from your original point of origin, wherever you were standing?
Yeah.
What do you think happened during that time period?
I think that I have friends that I write about this a little bit coming from darkness, but
yeah.
Well, the thing is, I was interviewed on another radio show, and that host said, it sounds like a biography. And now that we're talking, I can see where that comes from because, you don't always write about your own personal experiences, but sometimes it slips in there. And I think it's possible that I was with friends that I knew before. I believe that we have an eternal soul. I say I have a pair of brown shoes, but I'm not the brown shoes. The brown shoes are a reflection of maybe my style, okay? But I'm not the shoes, okay? It's not that you have an eternal soul. You are an eternal soul. You cannot have something that you are. If we have an eternal soul, from a scientific perspective, and this is looking at it from a science fiction perspective, let's say that they're able to clone a body, and they're able to move the soul from one body to another. So if you're alive and something happens to your body, it dies for whatever reason, and say you're a human alien or a gray or whatever, your soul could jump over to the next body that's cloned and waiting for you and proceed and move on. So therefore you have eternal life, if that makes sense. And in the Bible, whenever you look at any religious text, it's always best to go to the original language it was written in which is the particular Bible's Greek and Hebrew. In the Bible it says, "In my Father's house are many mansions," in the King James. "If it were not so, I would have told you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, so that where I am, there you may be also." Now, that word container in original Greek and Hebrew can be translated, in my Father's house are many mansions. That word mansion in original Greek and Hebrew can be translated as container or a vessel. And we know from various reports in ufology, from some of the Roswell stories and other experiences that have mentioned that, aliens refer to the body as a container or a vessel. Passage in the Bible, "My Father's house are many containers, many vessels," you can interpret that as bodies. So, so that's kind of the way I looked at when I did Coming from Darkness. I used that concept as part of the story. But yeah, so I felt like I had friends that I have known before, and they were checking up on me and assuring me that everything would be okay. It's kind of the feeling I had, but I said I won't undergo hypnosis to verify something. It's like I had this dead thing of nope, I won't do it. Is that?
No, I get it. And do you think it plays into any of these concepts for your books? Do you think that your friends may have placed latent messages in your mind that would manifest into these brilliant sci-fi pieces of art and work that you put together?
Partly, yeah. Partly is possible. I'm not going to say yes. I'll say it's possible. Mm-hmm. There's a probability that could be true. And some of it is, because I grew up a lot like you did, where I grew up in a independent Baptist church. I went to a Bible college and seminary for a year. Did not take any Bible classes there, so I don't want to mislead listeners. So I used to have a really good grasp on theology. And in Perceptual Threshold, for example, that was the first screenplay that I wrote. Ages Past and Perceptual Threshold were both based on screenplays. We touch base on those a little bit or something. But in Threshold, I was questioning my religious upbringing, I think, a lot in that. So that came from deep, deep within, because I questioned a lot of what I was taught. And if it's true, how would it be true? That kind of thing. And,
right. I think we all did that. And a Perception Threshold I wrote, is the earth to be stillborn or reborn anew? That the earth is like a woman in labor giving birth. And is the earth to be stillborn or reborn anew? Because right now we're at a real critical junction as a species. When you look at everything going on, we have, people around the world that are killing and slaughtering people of the same religion, but just different denominations, or people of other religions are going around lopping off heads, burning churches, and doing all kinds of things. You have, in politics, you have various groups trying to take over the politics and government so they can enforce religious law on people. We're at a real critical juncture here that we need to get through as a species. I hope we can get through it, but I'm not so positive that we will. That's not to be a doomsayer, because in the end, I think everything will be okay. But we have a lot of bumpy roads coming ahead, and I think these bumpy roads are going to last another 1,000 years. But I think we'll have disclosure between now and 2035 at the latest. Well, is Janet with us? Oh, okay. Karen, you got a question for Casper?
Wow, I'm just trying to take it all in, because Casper, we're hitting on, for me, we're hitting on all the same areas that were kind of my areas of pondering, and I love that you had that verse where it says, Jesus says, if there are many mansions in my Father's house. And when I was a little kid, I was a weird question, or even back then, I said, well, would he have told us that there was just one mansion in his Father's house? If there was many, and I told you there's many. But anyway, I just had an odd sense of things. But, I kind of went from the same, kind of a similar path, in the sense that I went from a religious background, and then I got interested in reading science fiction because I love the questions that science fiction asks and the ideas that it explores, the philosophical ideas that it explores. And then I tried my hand at writing a couple stories, and then I found out when the internet came along that my stories were actually almost like downloads or remote viewing or something of stuff that was actual hidden cases in the hidden files. So I kind of freaked myself out right there. So I thought, I better find out what this thing's about. Where am I getting this information? And I finally determined that, we have a common morphogenetic field, and when we go to write fiction, so much of the time we're dipping into, a higher mind. We're dipping into our consciousness. We're dipping into the future and the past. And probably there's nothing new under the sun, including any science fiction story you could possibly imagine. But yeah, I hear the religion. When you're a religious person, I think one very interesting part of that is you do get a planetary awareness. You get the idea of our world as this one world that's a creator created, and it's interesting to me that people who have that concept then turn around and hate their brother or want to kill them or put them down. And I was reading a story in the Huffington Post from a woman who was from my denominational background who she finally was done. She had a lot of questioning and felt frustrated. And she was finally done when a particular politician died, and the people in her church were laughing about it. And they thought it was funny because their political ideals had overshadowed, some compassion for just human life, And so, it's these hierarchical concepts that kind of get us away from, that are also right there in those books. And I'm probably thinking that you probably did dip into your experience to write science fiction. Maybe you'll convince yourself further as you keep writing, because we do get that from who we are. Like you said, we're not that brown pair of shoes, but we are who we are, an eternal being. And we can't help but speak out what is our truth or what we find very interesting and compelling. So, so are there some times when you're writing and you go that, you are writing truth or something you've researched deeply to believe to be true, and you simply just have to, the only thing that was changed was the names of the people just to protect the innocence, so to speak. Did you ever feel like in order to progress the story, you really had to write something straight up, that was a real case or something like that? Because I was able to go to the UFO Congress in February, and I talked to a movie producer, and they were putting actual case of the Phoenix Lights and putting the actual information from those cases into the movie, and then turned around and made it a, kind of shoot 'em up alien movie for people to be compelled to watch. But at the same time, if they Googled some of that stuff that they were, getting in the course of the movie, they would actually be on the path to go down the rabbit hole, so to speak. Have you had that experience?
Oh yeah, definitely. And the three science fiction books, Bristol's not science fiction, so in Ages Past, Coming from Darkness, and Perceptual Threshold, I have the giant space city, which we refer to as the New Jerusalem. It's probably actually the old Jerusalem. It's probably older than the one here, which is a city in space. It's 1,500 miles square. And in all three of those stories, I put a high court in there in the city. I put God makes an appearance. In each one of the three stories, I have God makes an appearance in each one of the three stories. It's a giant ball of energy. But that he's more a monetary thing. When we said a minute ago about past, present, and future, if you're living outside the timeline that we perceive, you would see past, present, and future in the same way as you look left to right. So it's why perhaps God can see, or what we would perceive as God, could be an alien, perhaps an energy being alien. We can't say positively, but that entity would possibly look from left to right and see past, present, and future in the same way that we look left to right to see, a telephone pole, a car, a kid riding a bicycle within that view. But yeah, you're right. I put stuff in there sometimes that I feel is true, where like the courts where there's and Ages Past, I bring it up, and the other ones as well. I call a Council of All, which is where you have various space aliens, and I put like lion aliens, bird type of aliens, hippo kind of aliens, that kind of thing. But there's like a council of 24, and I pulled it out of the Bible somewhere, and I can't say where I pulled it out of, other than I felt like I pulled it out of the Bible when I wrote it. I can't point to a specific spot at the moment. I know that when I was really young, in my late teens, somebody said that the Old Testament points to Christ's home as a star system booties. And I have searched everywhere for that. In the Bible, can't find it anywhere. John might be able to answer that question, but I couldn't find it anywhere. But I heard it, and it felt so right to me that I incorporated that into Ages Past as being the home where Jermac and Benjamin and Redding come from. So, but I know what you're saying is you feel sometimes you stick bits of truth in there, which is why I put laying it between the lines, and somewhere in there are bits of truth. It doesn't mean the stories themselves are true. It's just that you can get bits and pieces, and what you said was correct. And I think that some science fiction writers, whether intentionally or unintentionally, are preparing people for disclosure, whether it's intentionally or unintentionally, as far as they're aware of, preparing people for disclosure. But they are doing it, and they're probably doing it deliberately, but they're unaware that they're doing it deliberately.
Isn't there in the in the Bible it has where some angels measure the New Jerusalem, and it's basically a big cube? And I was thinking, this sounds like a... Go ahead.
1,500 miles square.
Right. So I was like, that's a Borg cube? What is that? It was like, it hit me one day. The Borg cube is a few cubes like, spaceships we see in science fiction. But go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, when I saw the Borg cube in the Star Trek, that's the first thing I thought of. But in the Bible, in the Bible, the New Jerusalem has, I think it was 12 gates, and it describes the gates in detail, which I incorporate that without looking it up. I incorporate it because it's made of jasper. The gold is so pure that the streets are made from the transparent gold. Think about that. It's something we haven't really seen here. But it has 12 gates in the New Jerusalem, the city in space, and I have it being on its way here in a row. So if you got something that big that's coming to this solar system to try and settle a dispute, it's probably not going to get here overnight. It's going to take some time. Hence, smaller craft will probably move a lot faster. But John, I'm right about the 12 gates, I think, aren't I, on that one?
Yeah, go ahead, John.
I'm sorry, about the 12 gates?
Around the New Jerusalem, the city in space.
I mean, to me, it's a mothership. That's what it sounds like to me. But going back to Christ coming from the Pleiades, it's interesting that you say that because Moroni, back in 1823, visited Joseph Smith and told him that he used to be an earthling and that he reincarnated as a being from the Pleiades, and that there was many, many more like him. And that got grafted into Christianity. As different as the Mormon religion is, it's still considered a Christian religion. And ironically, it goes back to the Pleiades. And then I was the opening speaker at Experiencers Speak 4 UFO conference August 28th of last year, and I did a seance to try and summon ET, and 4 of them showed up, 2 of them with blue skin, and they said that they were from the Pleiades also. So I don't think there's any coincidence to it at all. And if you look at especially the Maya and other Incas and Pueblo tribes throughout the American Southwest, they have a number of structures that mirror the star constellation and the star cluster of the Pleiades. So it's pretty clear that at least part of our origins here on this planet come from the Pleiades. And it's prophesied in many religious texts that there will be a second coming of not just our deity, our Christian deity Christ, but deities from all cultures and religions from around the world have a similar story of the gods descending from heaven in fiery chariots, establishing culture and religion, either creating us or manipulating the indigenous and fashioning a new being, okay? And then they set up culture and everything here, and then some kind of authority steps in and creates a non-interference treaty so that they cannot cohabitate and commingle with us humans anymore, but they all promised a return. And this is a common thread that goes throughout religions throughout the world. And of course the number 12. The number 12 just permeates throughout the universe, and it plays into sacred geometry and numerology. So there's absolutely something to what y'all just said.
Oh yeah, and the thing is, when I wrote Ages Past, I had so much fun doing that because when I originally wrote the screenplay in 92, 93, I had humans coming from various solar systems, star systems, and Earth was like was a colony at that time, and all the human races were intermixing, and this was a new colony. So I had a lot of fun with that, and I think that the human species is probably a type of human species, probably not exactly like us, but looking like us, similar, is probably more common than what we realize. But there's also, like you said, the blue beings, possible reptilians and other aliens, and I think that it's really highly probable that when we finally get out there, that we'll encounter various human races. It's very possible. I think it's very, very possible, because when I looked at and did Ages Past, I looked at all the various races on the planet, and thought, well, where would they? Well, if everybody came from space, it was a different race from each solar system. I had like Caucasians coming from the Orion. I had people like Indian coming from Pleiadius, Taurus, and different places like that, and Asian. In gathering here, I had the African coming from the star system Sirius. I probably mispronounced that. I apologize.
Sirius.
Coming from there, and they were all here intermixing. And in the book, there was a fear that some of the other alien races, specifically the reptilian, were concerned that if the humans intermix, it would create a new human race, and that would give them another seat on the Council of All, and that would tip the balance of power. And the entire thing was all being manipulated behind everybody's back without knowing it by the Greys. Because in the story, Booties had been isolated, and the way that Earth is now, and then finally broke out of that isolation, and exposed some corruption and stuff that was going on with the Greys, holding the humans prisoner on Booties for experiments, trying to turn them into themselves, and they lost their breeding stock. And when Earth became a colony, the Greys in the book turned around and interfered with everybody and kind of like, whispered so-and-so and caused everything that happened here. I know in Ages Past, this is before I knew about Planet X, where there's an asteroid belt out on the other side of Mars. I had another planet there, and in Ages Past, I destroyed that planet in a war, and part of it bounced off Mars, which put the huge scar there. Another part kind of like skipped off the Earth, which split up the continents and ruptured the canopy, which caused a huge flood that took what people called Pandora, not Pandora,
Pangea.
Pangea, thank you, and split the continents apart. So what's the Americas now drifted across the Atlantic plate until it impacted the Pacific, which pushed up the mountains and stuff. But there were colonists here at that time that happened. In order to have peace in the book, I don't want to give away too much of the book, but
good luck on that.
Yeah, good luck on that. But
now I just want to read it.
It went into isolation. Ages Past will make you cry. I'm going to warn you up front. That'll make you really cry. When I wrote that, it was really weird because I wrote that in where Dramatic Reading Benjamin speak using Old English, and I'm not sure where that came from. When I write by the seat of my pants. I mean, I'll get like a general idea for the story, like Ages Past, for example, was if Earth was a former human colony, how did it happen? And until I sit down and start typing, I started writing on an old 87 Mac when I was doing screenplays originally. I didn't know any of the characters until I got to that sentence and typed it out. I didn't know their name. I didn't know what they looked like. I didn't know their personality. I knew nothing about them until I sat down there and started typing. And then it was just there. So I know you're saying about possible downloads or that there's influence there.
Well, it's interesting because Casper and I were talking over the past few days over the phone, and I said the more you tell these stories, they sound like they could easily be true. I mean, you're plugging in fictitious names here and there and fictitious case scenarios, but, I mean, would you agree, Karen, that a lot of this sounds like it possibly is going on right now,
Oh, yeah. I mean, when he was talking about the different races, in the pantheon of the Egyptians, and of course, people have to realize that Moses in the Bible wasn't an Egyptian as a prince. He was brought up into the religion of the Egyptians, and their gods and goddesses were had animal heads, or that was their totem or something like that, of a different creature, the hippopotamus and the cat and the lioness and all that. I don't know if you wanted to know, but I actually found your biblical reference too, because when you said it was in the constellation of Bootes, I recalled from an ancient study of my own that was in the book of Job, and I went and looked it up, and the brightest star in the constellation is Arcturus, and then I went ding 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 for me because Arcturus is that's very important. Mm-hmm. Star Nation that has contacted, there's a lot of contactees who have contacts to Arcturus, and one thing that I've heard about Arcturus is that much of what incarnates or manifests here on Earth has to come through what's called the Arcturian gate or the Arcturian portal, and that a lot of Arcturian contactees and incarnates have come here because that's an important, place where we get some of our star racial influence from. And so, I think, if I know if I'm writing from the seat of my pants, I often do automatic writing or even poetry, I'll be just so surprised what'll just come right out. Because like I said, we have this common, our real history, the real history, right? What really happened, not what we're told what happened. It's all written in that Akashic record or that morphogenetics field, or as the late, great A.R. Borden taught my friends that were in this group, is a bio-kind, bio-mind. We have a common bio-mind, just like when fish swim and they all turn at the same time underwater, or birds fly and they all turn at the same time up in the air. That's a bio-kind, bio-mind. It unites a species together. So we have and then, of course, our human race has the back ends of secret people who have been in the secret program say that our human race is 22 different species that have come here one way or the other. I don't know if this was not a race that particularly interbred with anyone except the Chinese, but the Dropa were some people who crash landed on the planet in China, and they eventually moved in with the villagers and intermarried, and so you had this very unusual people who were hybrid-looking kind of people that are in China, and they left some artifacts, the Dropa stones, that were very mysterious. But some of those incursions, the people colonizing here, the Anunnaki maybe making a hybrid, group of people here, we have had possibly 22 different species that have become one or part of the human race, and we're of course not homogenous yet, because as my fella, who's full Irish and he's got white pale skin, and he says, how come my sunburn if my people evolved here? Which is a good question. Obviously, people with lighter skin, they probably evolved under a sun that wasn't exactly quite as bright. And so the people from that racial heritage, they get a sunburn when they go out in the sun. How's that even possible if we've been here the whole time? Obviously, they were part of a group of people who came here who had paler skin, and their blue eyes, the people who have blue eyes tend to be able to see better in the dark. So maybe they were at underground, maybe they came from, colonized from underground, areas. So this whole story of human history is a lot more complicated, and I think a lot more interesting than what we've been told is just either the evolution where we evolved from, one way or another, or creation, which just says just Adam and Eve there, right there. And I think there's something to the idea of a creation thing, but like I said, there's some plot holes in both stories, and it seems that the alien intervention, or that we have a very highly populated universe, which is to me a more exciting concept in many ways, of a creator that's the creator of all of that, and a much more longer period of time, millions and billions of years. I think that's terribly interesting. So this is why I've looked into these concepts myself. But I think you got some going there, Casper. It's awesome.
Yeah, it's always, when I write, I try to look at what's going on, and again, like you said, some of this, it could be our consciousness is awakening more. You look at Star Trek, for example, with Gene Roddenberry put in the non-interference clause for the Federation, which in that, again, some people can point, to history prior to Gene Roddenberry, where they believe, and John had pointed out this earlier, that has been around for a long, long time. And ages past, we end up being cast into isolation to bring about peace. But yeah, they all come from different worlds, and they're all human. So, I had to reject. I think I still have the rejection letter. I went through a cleansing about a year and a half ago. I just went because I was moving around the country, just threw a bunch of stuff away. But I had a rejection letter from a major publishing house on the book, and she told me in the rejection letter that she didn't feel that society was ready for a story like Ages Past. And I was like, my first thought was, how could society not be ready for all human races working together? Their only pursuits were, creativity, a quest for knowledge, and spiritual wisdom. And they're all working together. They weren't never at war with each other over skin tones. I mean, how could society not be ready for that? But that was a rejection letter I got from a publisher, if you can believe that. That was crazy.
Well, yeah, she wasn't ready for it.
Yeah.
She wasn't deep enough to fathom it, I would have to assert. So.
Yeah, it was, or I got one rejection letter on Ages Past, on Perceptual Threshold, where they were like, oh, we don't want any more stories about Atlantis. And I was like, where are you getting Atlantis out of Perceptual Threshold? Sorry.
Did you even read it?
Yeah. She read The City in Space and goes, oh, it's Atlantis. And it's like, no. Did you even read that? But sure. It was so interesting, but our history, we just don't know our history. It could be that we're a former human colony. People used to say a lost human colony. I don't necessarily buy that we're a lost human colony. If we are a human colony, I think something happened. Something happened. There's one theory that, we are the fallen angels, and we're descendants of them. But then there's the one where they talk about the angels of God in the Bible, saying the women of earth were fair and they had children and they were giants in those days. So there's also that angle. When you look at the interference perspective of it, going back to the Bible, after the great flood with Noah, everybody stayed in one place, and they built a tower. I actually heard this from an evangelical minister who was talking about this one time. So more evangelicals probably believe this more people realize, or review it as a possibility. But they built a tower, and then God supposedly confused all their languages and scattered them across the earth. Now, what if that wasn't a tower as in a building, or what if they were building a rocket ship and getting ready for space travel, and the gray alien said, we're not going to lose our breeding stock, confuse everybody's languages and scatter them. So it would be difficult for them to build and communicate technology with each other and build another rocket ship. I think we talked about that before, John. I'm not real sure.
The Tower of Babel. Yeah, the Tower of Babel.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And it's also been postulated that it was a particle accelerator. Because it had the basic architecture and design of one also by modern-day engineers interpreted as such. Whatever it was a technological device. it wasn't just a tower to, ascend to heaven. That's not what it was at all, but that's the way it was interpreted.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It's technology of some kind, whether particle accelerator, rocket ship. They could have been building some type of portal. We really don't know for sure, and a lot of our history is hidden from us. And the only things that survive catalytic catastrophes are like the Sphinx, for example, is what they're saying 10,000 years old now. Based on water erosion around it. So at one time it was in a watery area, which is now desert. We don't know our true history. I mean, we really, really don't. I think when disclosure comes the first time through, we have to be careful. We can't accept everything that we're being told at face value. We need to question it and say, okay, well, that's cool, that's nice, we're glad to hear that. We'd like to meet some other aliens out there, and get out on our own and explore and listen and hear what other alien races have to say, and not rely on just what one tells us.
Yeah, I mean, can we get a few opinions here? Can I get a second opinion here?
Yeah. Well, I understand what you're saying. We're not saying you're telling us the truth, you're lying to us. We'd like to get a second opinion on that. Thank you. I think we need to do that. That's a good one, John. I like that, John. That's a really good. I'll have to quote that somewhere.
That's a good one. I like
Well, just give me a plug.
Stick that in a book.
Use it for the rest of your life. Yeah,
let's stick that one in a book. That would be, give me a second opinion on that one, please.
John, when disclosure happens, we want you in the front row of the press attaché of Washington, D.C. to ask that question. Can we get a second opinion? That's awful.
I agree. Well, also, who's going to present disclosure? Who? And how are they going to present it? Is it going to be a fear tactic? Is it going to be a control tactic? Is it going to be a tactic, or is it going to be a source for unity, like you wrote about in your book? That which one was it again? The Ages Past. So,
well, Ages Past was a pre one. Yeah, but it could be when we get disclosure. I think it'll be a push for unity. But we're going to have such a problem with disclosure because you have these religious sects and religious cults and whatever you want to call them around the globe right now, and I think a lot of them are going to look at it and go, oh, okay, the demons that we were told about are here, that they're not going to go easily and willingly. We can get into biblical prophecy and the tribulation and all that. I don't know if you want to go down that road tonight, but yeah, I think that disclosure plays with all of that. It either comes before, during, or after. But yeah, we just don't, and coming from darkness, disclosure happens by accident. There's an accident, it happens when UFO crashes into a motel, and the shadow government's forced to move disclosure ahead of schedule. And then they have a device where they can scan people and detect alien implants. So let me back up a minute. Okay.
Yeah.
They make RFID chips for all the land where people have to have the biochip implant to buy or sell anything, which is also kind of biblically related. But the devices that read them are doubled up, that they can scan for alien implants. And they can tell if the alien implant was from a reptilian, a human, or a gray. With what alien race did the implant, by using the scanners that they scan for people's regular biochip that they have, that humans would be using for, their IDs and everything. And coming from darkness, they round up. There's a public outcry, and they round up all the former alien abductees they can grab, and they put them into these FEMA camps or concentration camps around the country, because there's a fear of contamination. So they round them all up and throw them into concentration camps. And coming from darkness, the main character's name is Bryce. When they scan him, he has an implant from multiple alien races, and he has an unknown plant. They don't know what alien race it was that put the implant there. He has multiples in an unknown plant. And that really frightens the government because they don't know who the unknown is, what it is. And so they go on a real hunt for him. And coming from darkness, I wanted to Bryce has to come, in any story has a flow to it. You have something happening at the beginning of the story, the middle of the story, and the end of the story action-wise, and characters have to mature and go through something in the same phase, where, they're at this point in their life emotionally, in the middle it's a different point, and at the end they come more to terms with something emotionally. That's part of the structure of a basic story. And for Bryce, he has to come to terms with child abuse in the past. Because I wrote the story originally in 1995, so it was a long, long time ago. And he has to come to terms with being child abuse in the past. And he was not the murderer, but he was present for a murder. So I took the two worst sins that people can think of, and people think of, and he has to come to terms with that in his life to learn to forgive himself and to forgive others, and to accept forgiveness and move forward. So I made that was part of his emotional structure, and within the story that goes with the concept of the story, where we as a species, if we've been held here prisoner against our will, if we've been experimented with, and someone's trying to turn us into them, and that all becomes knowledge and it has to end, that we need to be able to forgive them, forgive ourselves, accept forgiveness, and move forward as a species. If we can't learn to forgive, we can't, we're not going to be able to move forward. If we have been being abused by the Greys or whoever trying to turn us into them, we have to be able to forgive them for that and move forward. Is that follow a chain of thought?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just curious: is Janet still on the shelf? Is she laying on the couch or something? Oh, we love you, Janet.
I hope she feels better. Yeah. Go ahead, John. Go ahead.
I wanted to talk about chipping. There's a real interesting story about that. Are you familiar with the Brooklyn Bridge incident with Linda Corteil?
No.
Okay, Linda Corteil, her and her husband owned a local newspaper in Brooklyn, New York, and lived in a high-rise condominium. And I believe that it was November 30th of 1989, and a UFO approaches their condo right in the middle of Brooklyn. And the EMP from this space vehicle renders all of the vehicles on the Brooklyn Bridge useless. They all stop because of the EMP coming from the UFO. So now you have perhaps, 50 to 100 or more cars just stuck on the Brooklyn Bridge, and they couldn't help but look up and see a UFO right next to this high-rise condominium. And then they see this beam of light go into her condo and pull her and her kids out of the condo into the ship. And this was witnessed by many, many people. So then she ends up on the beach. Imagine this. She ends up on the beach, and she's with two agents wearing uniforms that, had no patches. There was no way to identify who they were or what government agency, police department, or anything. And then there was two Greys. And the Greys start talking through her to the agents. And they want to find out, the agents start talking, the Greys start talking through her to the agents. And then the agents ask the Greys, we want to work a deal with you where you give us all the names of the people with chips in them so that we can track them to see where they are actually sending those oscillating frequencies to. They wanted to track the alien frequencies back to the aliens that chipped the people in the first place. Okay?
Oh, wow.
And then, I know, and so she goes to her church. She was very much into the Catholic Church, and somehow the cardinal, she befriended the cardinal. Actually, the cardinal befriended her, and the cardinal was very, very close to Pope John Paul II. Okay, so to make a long story short, Pope John Paul knew about the whole story on the beach, and the cardinal at some point, after years of spending time with her, and she thought it was awkward, so she always brought her friend with her, and the cardinal was never inappropriate, nothing sexual, would always turn them on to dinner and just be nice to them. And right near the end of their relationship, he said, "So you were the lady in the sand. You were the lady on the beach." And that just floored her. And then right after that, she was invited to move to Vatican City. And it turned out that the Pope wanted to go through with everything, and he wanted to baptize the Greys.
I've heard the baptism thing before.
Pope John Paul II wanted to baptize the Greys. And what's a trip is I met her at a UFO conference, the one where I saw the blue beings, but it was the year before then. And I was actually on a shuttle to the airport with her, and she talked about the case the whole time. I mean, in the airport, on the shuttle, she talked about it the whole time, and she was just blowing my mind. And there was this other guy with World Bank and to be there, this incredibly intelligent Asian guy with World Bank. He didn't have anything to say about World Bank. We asked him about it. He couldn't budge a word about World Bank from him, I guess for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
But it was a total trip.
Is Pope John Paul, is that the one that just retired recently, or that was one before that?
No, he actually passed away, and they literally mummified his corpse. They mummified his corpse.
I think it's awfully strange that a pope retired, which is unheard of, and the pope that took his place is considered in many circles because of his education to be a scientist, and with disclosure on the horizon, it just seems like an oddity.
Especially after their announcement in 2008. Belief in extraterrestrials does not conflict with a belief in God, and I completely agree with that. I mean, they want to be the first ones to have said something, not even publicly, but to the world. And what kills me, every time I meet a Catholic, I ask them if they even heard of it, and they're like, "No, they never said that." I'm like, well, really, you need to, investigate your own roots to your own religion. I mean, you're irresponsible for not doing so.
They did put that in some kind of announcement that they believed that God had other children on other planets, and that basically that they should come to the faith just the same as we do, which the Native American they kind of shuddered, just because of what happened to us when the Catholics came over to North America. But and one thing a lot of people don't know is how invested the Vatican has always been in the sciences, and they have tremendous capacity in terms of telescopes that are pointed at the sun. My relative that was, his name was Father Paul, and he was in on the team that developed the Geiger counter, but because he was a Catholic priest, he couldn't have his name put on the invention, so it was called the Geiger after the guy who was one of the other guys on the team. But they've always courted very intelligent people who wanted to get a high education and be part of science, but maybe didn't go about it. Maybe they didn't have the money or something like that to go to college, and a prestigious college. They were able to do that through the auspices of the church. So also coupling with the fact that the Vatican records probably contained everything that was at Alexandria and every other document possible that you could possibly think of. A copy of it is likely in the Vatican vault. They have a lot more information about the extraterrestrial presence than probably any organization on the globe has. And there was a report from the back channels that they also had 3 skeletons or skulls, I wasn't sure which, that were basically gray alien skulls or skeletons. But, they've absolutely come out saying they do believe there is extraterrestrial life, and that they get a chance to convert also. So I thought that was sort of interesting. But absolutely. So we're finding more about what you're saying in your books, Casper, are pretty prescient, man. You got it going on.
Like I said, we were talking about coming from darkness, where, they hunt for brights, and that's kind of I was real afraid to release that book more than my other ones because of it just because of what Bryce goes through. It made me kind of afraid to release it, but it turned out to be one of my more downloaded books. That one and Ages Past are both more downloaded than the other ones. But yeah, and Coming from Darkness, we were talking earlier about the soul transplants. And there they discovered that some of the abductees, not all of them, but a select few, are possibly actually were programmed to complete a mission here on Earth, and some of them became musicians, actors, writers, directors, politicians, and so on, to try and guide humanity in different directions. And you had some were gray plants, some were human alien plants, some were other, and of course the humans and the grays don't like each other, so they're going, and you could tell which alien plant or who is programmed by which alien race or which one, if it's a gray alien plant or a human alien plant, by the type of work that they did. And that's where I went by the Bible, by their works you shall know them, where if you have a musician that's singing, ooh, ga, 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 baby, baby, probably a gray alien plant. If the musician is singing, save the environment, this is how to be a better person, that kind of thing, probably a human alien plant. And I could point to various bands that are really popular and say, look at the lyrics in this. I don't want to say it because I don't want to set up like a slander thing. But there are some bands that you can look at and look at the lyrics, and if you read Coming from Darkness and you take that literally as a possibility, and it could be, we don't know. If that is a possibility, and you look at the lyrics of various bands or the works of various writers or what's on politicians or what people do by their works, you shall know them, you can actually look at some of the lyrics and go, oh, wow, they're not singing about, thought they're singing about. If they're a human alien plant, they're actually singing about this. And it totally changes the meaning of a song if you look at it from that perspective. I could name a number of bands, but I don't want to set up a libel thing, But I don't think I did that with you, John, did I? Where I pointed out bands to you or something.
No, and I have a bunch in mind also. But if you can always use the disclaimer that I'm just guessing. I'm making an educated guess. I can't confirm or deny these next comments, but this and that. But I know exactly what you're talking about. A bunch of bands popped into my mind before you finished your sentence. So, yeah, absolutely. Some of them receiving downloads. One thing I will say is that Paul McCartney said that he did not know where the music came from that he wrote. That he was, so there you go. He said he could not define the origin of his inspiration, that he would sit down at the piano and it would just start to flow, or even on the guitar. It would just start to flow out, and next thing you know, he had a song, and some of them he would write in a few minutes. And one of the defining moments in the Beatles was when McCartney wrote "Obla Di Obla Da," and that's where John Lennon was like, "This is getting so stupid and less than intelligent." That was part of the reason. I'm sure there was a million other reasons, but that was one of the defining moments of when he left the band and started his own.
Oh yeah, and you look at Billy Joel, "River of Dreams." I remember reading that he talked about when he wrote that, he was sleeping, woke up in the dead of night, went down to the piano, and just spit out immediately. Bam, it was like right there. But it came like in the middle of the night, and he doesn't know really where it came from. It just was there. And "River of Dreams" is a great song. It's a really, really good song. Synchronicity, because we were talking about this, and then that song for some reason was popped in my head today, and I posted a link to it on Twitter. But Synchronicity, yeah. But yeah, when you look at some of these bands do, it's like amazing. It's amazing. I mean, look at the Foo Fighters, for example. That their name refers to, was it World War I or II, where the pilots would see UFOs, and they referred to the UFOs as Foo Fighters.
Yeah,
they were orbs the name that
would shut off their engines, and basically just stop their engines, but they didn't really crash. They would just stop them from going in certain directions. But yeah, the Foo Fighters. So David Grohl, who used to be with Nirvana, came up with that name, and so you got to think, what does David Grohl believe in? I think he's one of the best musicians out there.
Oh yeah, without a doubt, it's just excellent. They changed the music industry so much in the 1990s. Because we were coming out of that big hair
grunge.
spandex. They created the grunge, and they just changed the music industry so much. It's such a really, and lyrically they're extremely strong. Lyrically.
I think one thing. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying lyrically, I think they're really, really strong. And I worked in the music industry for on and off for almost 20 years. And when you get around some of these more famous people, just their presence or their auras are so strong, some of them, that it's just really, you can feel it. Because their presence and auras are so strong. It can be amazing. And you get around some of the mega stars and you're working with them. They have such a different mindset, a lot of them. Not all of them. Some get attitudes and so on and so forth. But some of them are really humble and everything else, but they have a really strong aura. Like their solar spirit's extremely strong, probably ancient. Ancient souls.
I agree.
Yeah, I believe that. Yeah, like Michael Lee Hill. We could start there.
Yeah, we were going to have to talk about Michael Lee Hill because he's not that far from Lake Michigan. He's over in Lake Erie, and he has many minutes of footage of craft going over Lake Erie. And also, if people don't know his work, MichaelLeeHill.net, he also has made a phenomenal connection between the patterns that are found in crop circles and the somatic patterns that are part of the sacred geometry of the energy of the universe. And I mean, I think musicians, because they can tune into, frequency and music, they're getting part of that, vision of what the universe or how it works. Because ostensibly the universe began with sound. When the breath of God, says, "Let there be," right? And one thing I was going to ask you about, if you've noticed since you've been in the music thing a while, it seems like we get a mass movement, like the British invasion, so to speak, and then the musical industry will capitalize it and go crazy with it, and then they'll try to tamp down on it and control it. And just about when it becomes, a product again, and they're churning out new bands and stuff, it's this productized sound or idea, then a new movement will come out of nowhere and freshen it all up again.
Toronto. Yeah, there's a real strong creative movement right now in film, television, and the music industry coming out of Toronto, Canada right now. I mean, it's really, you can kind of feel the vibe coming out of there. I think it's possible, like Seattle had Nirvana pop out of there. I think possibly, Michigan had, Bob Seger and a few other bands out of that area. I think Toronto, in the near future, we're going to see an explosion out of that area in the way of creativity. It's because there's just so much of it in there right now. It's amazing. It's like they're like, you're right, they're like clusters. I don't know how to explain it, but yeah, you're right. There's clusters that pop up.
And it keeps the industry, I mean, the music industry is very tightly controlled and managed and financed. And it keeps something that's really a communication of us with each other and possibly us with the rest of the universe. It keeps that new flush that comes in, that new energy that comes in. It's kind of like the Bible says, don't put, new wine in old wineskin, so to speak. It literally has to be a different style. It has to be different people. It has to bring in a whole new aesthetic. I happened to be in the Northwest when the grunge thing happened, and I kept looking at those kids wearing those clothes that we wore, hoodies and T-shirts with logos on it and waffle stomper shoes, and I said, hey, that's what we've been wearing there forever, since I was a kid. But it's just the whole vibe of it was starting again a new concept, and then it got I wouldn't say productized, but it's kind of settled in to be a thing, and so now it's got to come out somewhere else. So maybe Toronto's it,
Yeah, I'm not saying it is, but I just see a real strong creative presence in Toronto at the moment. But it could come out of somewhere else, because whenever something hits like that, it seems to like all of a sudden to come out of the blue. Though it's really not come out of the blue. People have been at it for years. It just suddenly clicks with society. But the music industry is not what it used to be. I mean, nowadays you have to. I'm not involved with it anymore, but nowadays you have to build up a massive social media following. You release your own music on digital downloads, and if you become an internet sensation, then you'll get picked up by a record company. It's changed a lot from when I was involved with it. It's become a lot different, and I think in some respects it's more difficult to get that mega fame than what it used to be. Because you look at the stuff they're cramming down our throats now is really, for the most part, is extremely mindless.
Garbage.
It's garbage. You look at how they're dressing, or lack thereof. It's mind-boggling to me. But we went through that before, where we had bubblegum music. In the late '60s and very early '70s, it called bubblegum music. Yummy, yummy, yummy. I got love in my tummy. Those kind of songs. And I'll admit, I was a kid when that came out, and I liked it. All right, but the stuff now is it's not even really bubblegum music. It's just plain garbage. It's just plain garbage. If they don't have any real depth. If you want to find some music with some depth, and there's a lot of it out there, but you got to really, really, really. It's word of mouth. And it's a lot of it's just straight out through social media, is word of mouth. It's not so much word of mouth as, I don't know what term to call it, John and Karen. Maybe you guys can help me create a new word for it. But word of mouth was when you told somebody about a book or a film or a song, and word of mouth spread. Now it's done through typing, through social media. So I'm not sure you can really call it word of mouth. It's a word of something, but I'm not sure what the
cybermouth
word mouth for. Cybermouth, yeah, I guess.
Okay, now I got a question. I want to know what I'm pretty sure that whatever alien race spawned the song "Yummy Yummy Yummy I Got Love in My Tummy" probably hasn't achieved space travel yet. I'm just making an assumption, but that's pretty fun. Okay, so yeah, our pop culture, okay, so one term that's come out that I've become aware of, and a lot of people have, is the term soft disclosure. Soft disclosure is where our pop culture is used to keep the idea that we're in a populated universe more or less in our culture. So through movies, through music, through television, every media that there is, books, etc. It's to keep us in the loop, so to speak, and having more and more information, which for anybody who's really following ufology or exopolitics deeply, you're just dying. And you cannot go to a movie or, well, I don't go to movies anymore. I always watch them, on Netflix or something. You can't watch something without going, oh, wait, that's that thing or that case or about that civilization or whatever, because, they've constantly been keeping us in the loop, and ostensibly Gene Roddenberry was kept in the loop. He a lot of people don't know that he went to some channeling sessions by a person, Phyllis Schlemler, that was her name, who and some others who channeled the Nine, which was some kind of group consciousness of 9 beings, and a lot of the early Star Trek. In fact, the prime directive concept, as a matter of fact, was supposedly came out of these that were from the Star Trek universe, were stories that came out of the galactic history. I tracked it down and found out that the book series Dune was coming from the history of the Orion Empire, very, very likely. That the Star Wars series is also coming out of the history of the it was in a long, long time ago, but it might not have been in a galaxy all that far away. But basically, the Star Wars was also showing, and it's interesting that before these movies came out, there were people, witnesses and experiencers who drew pictures and talked about aliens who ended up in these movies. And I'm pretty darn sure that Chewbacca is a Bigfoot, but that's just between you and me. But I mean, this is what science fiction can do. It lets us, put aside our consensus reality show. This is how the world is. We're the only ones here in the whole universe, and the whole entire universe is empty of anyone else except us. And then go to your work, or do your job. But buy the science fiction movie, but by golly, don't believe it. And I guess what I really loved about science fiction, since I was very young, I was a Trekkie very early on, was that it let us talk about those ideas and think about those ideas. And now I have yet to turn my hand to fiction. Like I said, I tried a few stories here and there, but I kept being so compelled by the underlying story. Here I am, right, doing this co-hosting about being an experiencer and the experiencer movement and all this stuff. But I'm just wondering, I know people sometimes have made the choice if they've had an experience to go, I think I'd rather write it as fiction. And I'm just wondering, as you've gone to events with other authors, have you been able to kind of have a discussion along that line, particularly in science fiction?
No, I haven't been to any conferences or anything of that sort at all. I wanted to go to Contact in the Desert this year, but it didn't work out. It was better that it didn't. So I had to be in Michigan for a reason. When I was trying to go and I could have got, some passes to get in, I didn't want to say I'd take it if I didn't have, wasn't able to get there. My truck is like a 95 with 270,000 miles on it. It runs good, but I wanted to make sure I had enough cash on me. If it broke down, I could get it towed off the freeway and still get home, And it turns out that it was better that I didn't go because I needed to be here for something really important. I couldn't have been driving back from California here at the same time. You mentioned soft disclosure about 4 or 5 years ago through some of the UFO forums, and the Outpost Forum talked about this as well, was there was a program called Disclosure Light, which sounds similar to soft disclosure. When you talk about science fiction being you're bringing people in and awakening them slowly, I think some of the stuff that we see out there in music and in film and television and so on is designed to keep the masses asleep, to keep them asleep. They don't want them to wake up. And there's another group of people that are trying to wake them up, which kind of goes back to coming from darkness in that respect. But, so I think, some of the media is designed to keep everybody asleep. Think about the Goo Goo Gaga songs, and some of the stuff is really deep and meant to awaken two forces at work here against each other. Does that make sense, Karen?
Oh, yeah. I definitely think that the entertainment media, in my opinion, has entertainment value to keep people entertained, but it has just enough tantalizing truth to it that somewhere in our, sometimes when you look at an idea, you go, wow, that could be true, And I think some of the stories that go back to the Greek gods and stuff like that, there's a prehistory before Greece, that's worth looking at. And as I've been studying that, I'm going, oh, okay, now I see how these fiction ones take some ideas from that older story to engage us. We get interested in it because it's about something we know something about. But then it takes the road down to, all the monsters that got to be there and the spaceship chases and whatever, and the pretty girl and whatever, for the entertainment value that we're shelling out big bucks for. You'll laugh, you'll cry, you'll kiss $9 goodbye. It's and that's where we get caught back up into, it's just a show and let's leave the theater. And I think something I really don't care for is we literally almost every movie about extraterrestrials is violent. They're coming to invade us. They look like big, scary bug, lizard, dragon things that shoot fire out of their eyes. I mean, every ET is like that. And I think it's been a while since we had a non-scary ET. The recent one was Paul. That silly movie about about Roswell.
Oh, yeah.
But that was a finally kind of, it was far too human to really be an alien. It was just basically a human. It was a human-like, you know. But that was, it's been a while. It was refreshing that there was a character who was likable and intelligent and funny. It's been a while since we've had too many of those.
Yeah, we don't get those. We had that for a while, and then all of a sudden we got, like you said, all these harsh alien invasion movies. It's like this summer we had the sequel for Independence Day coming out. And the ships are bigger and badder than they were the first time. You know, so, but yeah, now you get all this alien invasion thing that pops up all the time. I have an interesting thing just to realize. It's kind of off topic, but not completely. I went through the LA King riots in 1992, and we had rolling power outages as the riots were going on. And the lights went out, and I was standing out. I was watching the business, but I would run home, take a shower, and go back to the rehearsal studio to guard it. And I was coming out from taking a shower. We had a rolling power outage, and some neighborhood kids were looking up and going, "What are those lights up in the sky? What's that big bright one?" And I made an educated guess. I go, "Well, this is that star system, and I think that's Jupiter over there." They couldn't see the heavens. They couldn't see the stars because of all the pollution in the air, one. Two is all the neon lights and all the street lights. There's so many of it just blocks out their view of the heavens. So they're not able to look upward and dream of traveling out into space and going that direction. But they were astounded when they actually saw the stars. And I was like, you kids need to get out to the desert, you know, and look up.
Oh, wow. That kind of hurt my feelings.
It was amazing, but they were so ignorant to the stars that because they grew up in the city, they never leave the city. If they do, it's not far enough out from the city to get in an area where they can actually look up and see the night heavens. They were just like astounded, you know. I think they realized they were stars, but they just like, what is that, you know? I was like, oh, those are the stars. And they still weren't really clear because of the pollution, but you could see them where you normally couldn't because the lights were all out in the city. You know, that was a plus side of the riots, but I don't think there was much to that. But yeah, it was just amazing, and that we blind our children to the stars above, you know, with light pollution. It's incredible.
That's very true. I just want to tell everybody that Janet had the board, so the episode will run out at the top of the hour. So we have till the top of the hour to talk, and sometimes my feed will jump off. So John, if you take it to the end of the show, that'd be great. Having a good time. So let's just keep going, and we got this, you know, about 13 minutes according to my clock, and just keep asking questions. It's been really fun. I've told Janet a while back I was hoping we'd have some discussion about science fiction, because when she and I have conversations, do you remember that Star Trek episode when blah, blah, blah happened? And we talk about it. She was a big Trekkie, and I was a Trekkie too. And I wanted to go back just for a second back to the, you guys were talking about, Project Blue Book closing when it did. And I'm very chin deep into the whole Apollo missions that happened. And I think one thing that was kind of happening right there is that as a narrative of the government, they're getting more and more and more of these reports. They certainly don't want to keep investigating them and adding more cases for everyone to be baffled by. So I think you have a coinciding of the Blue Book kind of winding down just as the Apollo effort kind of winds up, because I think one of the things they wanted to do was change the story of space, because they didn't have mastery of space, and it made them nervous because they were our American Air Force and military was supposed to have, you know, control of our skies, and obviously it didn't seem that we didn't. So they said, okay, well, whatever it is, it's not a threat to national security, giving them an out not to have to talk about it anymore. And then going into the Apollo era, they're changing the narrative of space to be, you know, the space story, or NASA. I kind of say NASA's really, they say never a straight answer. I say not a space agency, meaning that it is a branding organization, and it's just as much defining a narrative and making us decide what real space is as it is, ostensibly sending astronauts to the moon and whatnot at that time. So, you know, this is the thing, is that they sublimated the UFO story by all of the information that came out about NASA, and we're going to go to the moon. And I remember Walter Cronkite and all the things that were going on. And as little kids, we thought we were going to go there about a day after the astronauts went. We thought we'd go the next day. But, I mean, we were very excited because it was a space age. And, and then it just kind of got killed, there. So we went with the shuttle thing for a while. Now it's Mars, let's go to Mars. And I'm like, wait a second. We really didn't accomplish everything we said we would back during the Apollo era. And, part of the reason I found out by working with anomalists, people who look at lunar anomalies, is the fact that they found stuff up there. And some of those are found in NASA images. And so basically it got even more dicey for the government because one thing you have witnesses seeing stuff fly in the sky, and then all of a sudden you have both astronauts, who, of course, were sworn to secrecy, and scientists and other people saying, hey, what's that on that photograph right there? So, disclosure is very likely to happen simply because the cat's not going to be able to stay in that bag. And I just wanted to get you guys... Go ahead.
Elon Musk announced today, or the other day, and he was interviewed again in the Washington Post, had a big article on it, where he plans to start a colony on Mars by 2025. Well, that's only, 9 years old? Well, it's 2016 now, 2025. That's not very far away. Really?
Not at all.
Let's say we already have colonies on the moon and Mars, and that we have for many decades, and that a lot of these projects like Mars One and all that is just a huge disinformation act to make us think that we haven't even gotten there yet. I'm just not buying any of it. Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberth, who worked for Nazi Anunnarbe Society, basically they were threatened to engineer those rockets, and also D-Glock, space-time travel vehicle, or the Nazis would kill them. And so during Operation Paperclip, we commandeer thousands of those Nazi and German scientists to work for us. And Hermann Oberth and Werner von Braun both admitted that they actually worked with extraterrestrials to develop this kind of craft. And that was back in the 40s. So, when they came over here from Operation Paperclip, they had their own covert kind of warehouse, hangar where they were developing that kind of craft, and that NASA was actually the disinformation that they wanted to put on the face of the nation. So, anything that we hear on TV is just a big fat lie. Me and Karen were talking about this earlier. Everything with NASA is, it's just a big disinformation act. We have been to the moon over 50 years ago. We have been to Mars over 50 years ago. D-Glock was a space-time travel vehicle that, guess what, nobody ever found. After World War II and the Germans surrendered to us, nobody could find it. Everybody was looking for it. The Russians were looking for it too. Everybody wanted to find D-Glock. And supposedly Hans Kammler or Heinrich Himmler or one of those vanished in it, possibly off into the past or the future. They took that space-time travel vehicle, and it's never been found. Or maybe it was found, and nobody's ever going to tell us that it was found because they were using it for engineering more space-time travel vehicles. So,
that was the thing that looked like a giant. That's one that looked like a giant bell.
Yeah, exactly. That was being designed in the late 30s. I mean, really, that was being designed in the late 30s with the help of extraterrestrials. What happened, there was a UFO crash in the Black Forest in 1936, and they were able to commandeer a UFO, and there was a couple occupants that died, and there was a couple ETs that lived, and the ETs that lived started to work with Hitler and the Anunnarbe Society and the German scientists, not even to retro-engineer, because Brett Colin Shepard, Christine Patrick's love interest and research partner, I used the term retro-engineer a few months ago on a show, and he's like, no. They were building them. They weren't retro-engineering them. They were literally building them. And I'm like, okay, I stand corrected. and that really just put a whole new perspective and spin on it for me. So anyway, I'm very passionate about that. I wrote about it in my book, Yahweh the Biblical God is an Alien, and I'm not the only one who has written or talked about that. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, and I briefly, watched a video on it or read about it a little bit, but I didn't research it to the extent that you did. It sounds like I probably should spend more time researching it. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's a lot of available research out there about it, and also I learned a lot of what I just said based on information I got from Ancient Aliens, which was on the History Channel tonight, and actually they have a brand new episode that's on right now. So I'll watch that. I'll watch that after the show.
Well, I was going to start setting the DVR for that. I didn't know that was back on.
Yeah, I got it on my DVR. It's recording. The little red light's on, and I'm excited. So
we got about 5 more minutes, and I'm working on a presentation. Janet, Sasha, Lesson, and we're all working on a presentation for the 18th. More information coming in future shows. But I found this quote from Carl Sagan, and he said in 1962, Sagan spoke on the possibility of discovering alien artifacts on the moon, stating that forthcoming photographic reconnaissance of the moon from space vehicles, particularly of the back, might bear these possibilities in mind. And I was really stunned because, how did he know? How did he know there was stuff on the back of the moon in 1962? And you would never expect any scientist today to speculate based on something that was going to go up in space and around the moon, giving us, video confirmation or picture confirmation of anything. They would never speculate on that. So my feeling was Carl Sagan saw something. He had already been privy to photographs of the back of the moon. He worked very closely with Dr. Thornton Page of NASA, who, ostensibly, knew a lot more than he was saying. And, by the time they were doing the Apollo missions, they absolutely knew a lot more, again, than what they were saying. And that's not to take away from the achievements of Apollo, because it was our only, front-wise program, and these guys were pretty serious about it. At least I've learned how much effort they went to. But yeah, we've got a dog and pony show that is beginning to wear thin. The more we know, the more information comes out. It seems like it's exploding. And I think you're right. I think we are heading toward true disclosure, not just the fake disclosure. And I'll just say real quickly, the disclosure they want to give us at first is a controlled burn disclosure, and it's basically the idea so that the powers that be can stay in power, the ones that have been lying to us. And I think the disclosure that we're looking for is us to each other. We are disclosure. Experiencers who tell each other, people who studied and tell what they know, researched and tell what they know. That's the disclosure to look for, is that we all collectively say, okay, the elephant's in the room, we're going to talk about it. That's my belief. Any further words from you guys? Go ahead.
Hey, Casper, why don't you wrap it up? We have about 2 minutes. Tell everybody how they can find you and your books and websites, etc.
I want to thank you for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. I had a lot of fun. If you go to CasperParks.com, click into the main menu. It gives you a link for where you can download my ebooks, which are running free. I'm going to run them free now through the 4th of July. At Barnes & Noble, Google Play, iTunes, and Kobo. At Amazon, they're 99 cents for the ebooks. You can request Amazon price match free and just name one of the other sites. Sometimes they'll price match, sometimes they won't. I'm not sure how that works. You can follow me on Twitter at Casper Parks, and also on Google Plus as well. And again, I want to say thank you for having me on the show. And I want to say to the listeners, stay within the cycle of all. That's my little quote that I have going. And I really appreciate it. If you do read the books, please leave a review for me. That helps move the books up in the algorithm. And again, there are some grammar errors, but the stories themselves are really, really good. People seem to really enjoy them.
Oh, that's terrific. What are you working on right now for the future?
I'm working on a rock and roll story, and then I'm going to do science fiction. And I'm moving back to science fiction after that again. But it's all part of the same series. But the next one, you're not going to know what science. The reader's not going to know it's science fiction unless they've read my other books. It'll make a reference to some stuff in the other books. But if you just read that book by itself, the one I'm working on now, you're not going to know that it's related to the universe I created for the other 3 books. Being Perception of Threshold, Ages Past, and Coming from Darkness. Bristol's that historical one. It's just more of a standalone. But the one I'm working on now ties into the other ones, but they're not going to realize it's science fiction unless they've read the other ones. And then the book after that, the one I'm working on now is Accidental Destiny, and the next book in the Destiny series will take the reader back into science fiction, where it's straight out science fiction. All right. I want to say thanks again.
Hey, Casper, thanks for joining us on the show tonight. We appreciate everything you had to share with us, and your science fiction novels are absolutely fascinating.
All right, thank you, and have a good night.
All right, you too. Bye.
Want entertainment designed just for you? Then check out customizable streaming TV from Xfinity. It makes your life simple, easy, awesome.
Xfinity gives you customizable streaming TV options. Enjoy the most free shows anywhere on any device, and even access your streaming apps right on your TV with X1. Go to Xfinity.com, call 1-800-XFINITY, or visit a store today to learn more. Restrictions apply.